The sun hits your eyes the moment you step into the arena. For one dizzying second, you're blind. The crowd becomes a wall of sound and sweat and dust. Then, you see him, your opponent. He's big. Bigger than you. His helmet has a crest that makes him look like a mythical beast. A murmillo, by the shape of it. Shield up. Sword low. Classic stance. But as you circle him, your mind drifts, just for a second, to the poem you began last night. Something about how love is like an arrow shot into fog. Maybe not your best. Maybe too obvious. But it's real. It's yours. And that's more than you can say about your armor, which was handed to you secondhand and still smells like the last guy who wore it. He didn't make it out. You lunge, and he parries. The crowd cheers. You slip past his flank and land a shallow cut. Not enough to end it. Enough to survive the round. The crowd wants drama, not speed. They crave the slow burn. Later, in the dusty shade beneath the stands, you sit on a stone bench with your back against the cool wall. A medic binds your arm. You wince, not from pain, but from the regret of the final line you couldn't remember mid-fight. It had the word yearn in it. Or maybe fern. You'll figure it out tonight. Or not. If they throw you back out there tomorrow, you might not get another chance. Here's the strange thing. Gladiators weren't all doomed animals. Some were stars. Endorsed. Idolized. There are old Roman graffiti scraps declaring undying love for fighters with nicknames like the Thracian Tiger or the Blonde Beast. You've even seen one about you, scrawled near the latrines, the silent sword. He fights like he's thinking of someone else. You don't know who wrote it, but you hope it was her. And still, at night, when the fires die down and your cellmates snore like lions, you trace lines of poetry onto your own arm with your fingertip, pretending it's ink. If the guards catch you writing again, there'll be lashes. If your poems get out, there could be worse. But you can't stop. Because even in Rome, this empire of conquest and concrete, someone has to whisper that beauty exists. And tonight, that someone is you. You were born with a sword in your hand. That came later. Much later. You were born in the shadow of Capua's city walls, in a sun-baked alley that always smelled like goat's stew and vinegar. Your mother, when she was sober, used to tell you that the gods gave you a soft heart and cursed you with strong shoulders. You'll be torn in two, she warned. Or worse, used by both. Your father? Never met him. Some say he was a soldier who passed through, others a slave who ran. Either way, he left you the gift of ambiguity, and those thick wrists that could snap a chicken's neck or cradle a kitten. Capua was no place for dreams. Especially not the kind of dreams that involved syllables and similes. You learned early on that clever boys got ignored, but quiet boys? Quiet boys who could lift crates, run fast, and didn't cry when punched, they got noticed. At 8, you're hauling olives. At 10, you're dodging fists in street brawls that feel more like theater. At 12, someone pays a coin to see you break a boy's nose in one swing. You don't enjoy it. But the applause? That digs in. That sticks. Still, sometimes you scratch words into clay with a twig. Words you don't even fully understand, phrases you overhear in the market from the traveling poets, the street orators, the old ex-legionary who sells pickled eggs and quotes Virgil when drunk. Love conquers all, he mutters once, burping it into a jar of sour cabbage. You don't forget it. Historians still argue whether literacy was common among lower-class Romans, especially among gladiators. But you found scraps of knowledge like rats find crumbs, desperate, creative, and willing to chew through anything for it. Your break came at 15. You're caught stealing a satchel of figs. Instead of a hand being chopped, the merchant stares at you, tall for your age, shoulders like a centurion, and says, "You fight for me now." That man was a lanista, a trainer of gladiators. Figs for fists. Not a bad trade, you figured. Training was brutal. Not just physically, though, yes, you vomited your first week and passed out in a sandpit your second, but spiritually. You're drilled to become a weapon, not a man. They measure your worth in bruises and sweat and the way you hold eye contact when someone's about to stab you. The poetry fades for a while. You forget the curves of letters. The elegance of a verb. You're told to forget softness. One instructor even catches you humming a lullaby under your breath. He slaps you so hard your ears ring for 2 days. Still, you dream in verses. Even when you don't mean to. There's a moment during drills where a blade slices so close it parts the air like ribbon. And you think, the wind sighs before it sings. You don't even know what that means. But it feels like something. In secret, you begin to write again. using stolen charcoal and whatever you can find, old scraps of leather, a discarded wine jug's label, the back of a training manual meant for Roman recruits. You keep it all buried in a sack under your straw. Some nights, you recite poems to yourself in the dark, whispering between snores and dreams. Most of the others don't notice. Or don't care. A few mock you. One, a wiry Greek named Marcellus, tries to listen. He says he once studied under a philosopher but got caught cheating with a nobleman's wife. Now he sharpens blades for the arena and tries to remember Aristotle between hangovers. You should write about death, Marcellus suggests. Or at least about women. No one wants a love poem from a guy who just split a man's ribs. You smile, but you don't stop. Because the words matter. Not just to you, but to the person you'll be one day, if you make it out. Because poetry is hope, and hope is rebellion. Especially in a place where you're trained to believe there is none. On your 17th name day, the lanista gives you a blade with your initials etched into the hilt. It's supposed to be a reward. But you can't help thinking, a pen would have been cheaper. And infinitely more dangerous. You fight your first match the next morning. It's quick, bloody, and oddly quiet in your head. Like someone pressed pause on the world. When it's over, and the crowd cheers for you, your tunic soaked in someone else's life. All you can think of is a line that's been swirling in your mind for days. I walk through fire not to live, but to be remembered by someone who might one day write me down. No one hears it but you. By now, you've developed a rhythm, a brutal, exhausting rhythm. Fight, eat, sleep, train, repeat. Somewhere in that cracked, sweat-stained routine, you've managed to carve out something tender. A hiding place. Your poetry. It begins with a chicken feather. Literally. One of the kitchen hands is plucking birds when you walk past and see a particularly long, dark feather flutter to the ground. You pocket it without thinking, like some kid stuffing sweets into their tunic. Later that night, you dip it in crushed berries and begin to write. The words come haltingly at first. You're out of practice. It's like trying to remember a song you only half heard once, years ago. But slowly, the lines begin to flow. You write about heat rising off stone, about the way your breath fogs on cold mornings, about the fear that lives in your ribcage and pretends to be courage. You keep the poems under your straw mattress, folded carefully, smoothed out each night like prayers. One even makes it onto the back of a broken practice shield, scratched so faintly that you have to tilt it toward firelight to even read it. Not that anyone else is looking. Who cares what bloodied slave scrawls after dusk? There's an old debate about whether gladiators saw themselves as artists. Most say no. They were too broken, too tired, too hunted. But you're proof that even in a place built for violence, something else can grow. Like moss in the cracks of a ruined temple. One night, after a match leaves your thighs stitched and sore, you find yourself whispering a love poem into the stale air. It's about someone you've never met. Someone you've imagined. A woman who doesn't flinch when she sees your scars. A woman who doesn't look at you like you're just a story for someone else to tell. But then, things change. You wake one morning to find your parchment disturbed. Not stolen, just touched. The corner is turned down. A smudge of unfamiliar charcoal stains one verse. Your heart skips. Did someone find it? Did they read it? You scan the barracks, but no one meets your eyes. The big Gaul with the broken nose is snoring. Marcellus is humming to himself, still drunk on sour wine. But someone knows. From that day on, you become more careful. You write less. Hide better. You even start using code, mixing Latin and Greek, slipping in metaphors that only you can untangle. It's a game. A shield. A secret identity in a world that insists you be nothing but muscle and reflex. Still, the urge doesn't leave. If anything, it grows. You feel poems building in your chest during matches, clawing at your ribs as you dodge blows. You'll lose focus one day, you tell yourself. You'll catch a blade in the gut because you were thinking about rhymes. And yet, you keep going. One morning, while gathering firewood near the edge of camp, you find a shard of pottery. On its curved surface, someone has scrawled a line in trembling Latin. His blade is sharp, but his words cut deeper. You stare at it for a long time. That evening, you return to your mattress to find another note. Folded. Slipped beneath your straw. 4 words, keep writing. I see you. Now your heart pounds harder than it does before battle. Is it a warning? A trap? Or something else entirely? The next day, you don't write. Or the next. But on the 3rd night, you give in. You write a sonnet. You make it short, just in case. But it's the best thing you've ever written. You leave it where the last note was found. And sure enough, it's gone the next day. A week later, another reply appears. This one with a suggestion: try writing in elegiac couplets. Show me you've read Propertius. You nearly dropped the thing. Whoever this is, they're educated, clever, and they like your work. So now, you're no longer writing just for yourself. You're writing for someone who understands. The feather quill gets replaced with a sharper one, a pigeon this time. The ink improves too, soot and oil mixed into something thicker, bolder. You start keeping time by poems, not matches. That's when the guards start noticing. A locker search turns up nothing, thanks to your hiding spot behind a loose brick. But the glances, they're sharper now. The silence is longer. One of them even mutters, "Poet boy," under his breath as you walk by. Still, you don't stop. Because when you write, you forget that your future is likely chained to someone else's entertainment. You forget the screams, the dust, the bets. You become something else. You become real. And then, like a dropped amphora shattering in slow motion, she appears. You're at the market square in Capua, allowed out under guard because your lanista thinks it's good for morale. A little fresh air before next week's games. Gladiators in pairs, leashed by reputation more than chains, wander among stalls hawking honey dates, dyed tunics, and questionable sausages. You're pretending to look at sandals, more for the shade than the leather, when you hear laughter that makes your spine forget how to hold itself straight. It's not the high-pitched titter of patrician girls flaunting boredom. It's richer, lower, like a warm cup of spiced wine. You turn, and there she is, Livia. Of course, you don't know her name yet. All you know is the way her braid curves over one shoulder, the subtle defiance in the tilt of her chin, and the strange, dangerous fact that she's looking directly at you. Not through you. At you. Historians still argue whether noblewomen truly had access to the same markets as the commoners or if it was only their slaves who handled the errands. But whoever she is, Livia moves with too much confidence to be anyone's servant. And she's not accompanied by a cluster of whispering matrons. Just one bored-looking bodyguard with a spear and an even worse hand. You nod once, out of habit. She arches a brow. Then, impossibly, she walks straight over. "You're the one they call the Silent Sword," she says. Your throat forgets how to work. She waits a beat, clearly enjoying the power imbalance. Then, "You really don't talk?" "I do," you say, voice dry from too many swallowed words. "Just not when I have nothing worth saying." She grins. "That sounds like something a poet would say." Your heart skips. Just once, like a child tripping on uneven stone. You want to deny it, to shrug. But instead, you ask, "What makes you think I'm a poet?" She leans in slightly, voice lowering like a secret, because only someone who sees more than blood looks at olives like they're trying to write about them. You glance down and realize you're still holding one. A small, bruised one. Not worth more than a copper coin. But suddenly, it feels like treasure. Livia stays just long enough to leave your senses spinning. Then she nods to her bodyguard and disappears into the swirl of traders and sandal hawkers. That night, you write about her. Of course you do. You don't have her name. You don't even have her voice memorized, not fully. But you remember the shape of her smile and the way she stood like someone who'd never been told no and accepted it. You write a haiku, completely inappropriate for the time, but who's keeping track? Braids like tide whispers. Eyes that know too many things. I forget to breathe. The next morning, you slip the scrap into the space behind the brick. You don't expect it to vanish. But it does. And then, a day later, another note appears. This one's in her handwriting. You don't need to ask how you know. It's precise, confident, Roman cursive but with flourishes, like someone who practiced in marble margins. She writes, "Not bad. Try again. Make it about the olives next time." Your ribs ache, not from bruises, but from smiling. Days pass, then weeks. You don't see her again in person, not yet, but you see her in words, in replies, in challenges. She asks questions. Sometimes simple ones, like, what does the sky feel like just before a fight? Other times, strange ones, if you could only save one line of poetry, ever, which would it be? You answer all of them, often in verse. Sometimes with trembling hands, sometimes with bleeding fingers after a tough round in the arena. One evening, after a particularly cruel match, you return to your cell battered and limping. You find a folded cloth on your bedroll. It smells faintly of lavender. Inside is a clean bandage. And a note. Even warriors must rest their wrists, poet. You don't tell anyone. Not even Marcellus, who keeps watching you like he suspects something. But now, you train harder. Not because you love the fights, but because you hate the idea of not surviving long enough to answer her next question. You begin to listen to the world differently. The clang of swords sounds like punctuation. The sweat trickling down your back becomes an ellipsis. Even the birdsong outside your window before dawn starts to feel like a prelude. And the poems get better. One night, you write her something that makes your chest hurt. They say the gods love war, but I think they simply never met a girl who looked like a reason to choose peace. You never hear what she thought of that one. But the next day, someone leaves olives at your bunk. Not bruise. Perfect. Green as hope. You're halfway through sharpening your blade when the wall behind the latrine catches your eye. It wasn't there yesterday. At least, you're pretty sure it wasn't. Scrawled in charcoal on the rough plaster, tall, slanted letters, some misshapen but unmistakably familiar, is a fragment of your own poem. Not one of the ones you shared with Lydia. No. This is older. Something you wrote for yourself, back when you thought no one would ever read it. My silence is louder than a scream / my breath is borrowed from a dream. You blink. And then, just below it, in a different hand, messier, more aggressive, is a reply. Silence is cowardice dressed in rhyme, / I write with blood, not borrowed time. You step back. A poetic duel. On a wall. In the lavatory, of all places. Historians still argue whether graffiti was treated seriously in Rome or dismissed as the scribbles of the illiterate. But if the love notes and gladiator tributes carved into Pompeii's ruins say anything, it's that Romans took their wall poetry to heart, especially when it came with a splash of drama. The next morning, the verses have multiplied. The wall now boasts 6 lines, your 2, the challenger's 2, and now a pair of barbed additions. Your sword is dull, your meter worse. Go fight. Leave verse to those who nurse. You're offended. And intrigued. And very, very awake at 2 in the morning writing a response on a shard of broken amphora. You retaliate by leaning into metaphor. You insult their meter. You imply their mother can't scan a hexameter line. Petty? Maybe. But thrilling. And soon, it escalates. Your secret sparring partner, now dubbed the graffiti ghost in your head, keeps pace. Sometimes you wonder if it's Marcellus. Other times, you suspect a guard. Maybe even one of the medics. The idea of a bored imperial scribe moonlighting as a poetic saboteur keeps you entertained through more than one grueling sparring session. Then one day, the Lanista summons you. You expect a beating. Or worse. But instead, he waves a strip of parchment under your nose. It's covered in verse, your verse. The graffiti ghost has been copying your lines and passing them around. Or mocking them. Or both. But here's the twist, people love it. There's a senator's wife who recited one at dinner, the Lanista says, clearly baffled. She wants to sponsor you. Not as a fighter. As a performance poet? You blink. Is that a thing? He shrugs. It is if she says it is. Now you're caught in a strange, shifting world. One where your body belongs to the arena, but your words belong to the street. We're the same people who cheer when you smash someone's face and will whisper your rhymes as they sip wine under mosaic ceilings. And the graffiti ghost? Still going strong. You stopped thinking of them as an enemy. Now it's more like a game. A strange, poetic chess match played across alleyways, latrine walls, the underside of benches. You leave lines tucked behind statues. They reply in riddles carved into tree bark. One day, they reference your line about Lydia's braid. That's when you realize they're closer than you thought. You write. If you know her, don't speak her name. She is flame wrapped in olive skin, too sacred for this game. They reply. Then guard her with both ink and steel. For words alone won't make her real. It's the closest thing to a warning you've gotten since the last time your ribs cracked under a trident. The poetry war reaches the upper levels of the ludus. Even the guards start betting on who will write the next line. Some claim it's all orchestrated, that you and your rival are one and the same. Others think it's a sign of divine favor. A new Orpheus rising from Rome's bloodiest soil. You don't care. Because every verse, every rebuttal, every stinging couplet, it keeps your mind alive. It keeps the dust and death from becoming all you know. And it reminds you that somewhere, someone is watching, reading, waiting for your next word. And if that's not power, what is? It's during a morning sparring session, sun already hot enough to bake bread on your shield, that you realize something strange has happened. You're parrying a blunt blade, sweat streaking down your spine, but you're not thinking about footwork or angles. You're thinking about a line you can't quite land. Something about how blood and ink dry the same way in the sun. You almost get your ears sliced off for it. Your trainer screams, of course. Focus, poet, he bellows. He means it as an insult, but you smile behind your mouthguard. He's not wrong. Your world is split into two. By day, you're muscle. You eat to gain weight. You train to become efficient. Not elegant, just deadly. You are called by a name that isn't yours. Thrax. It means Thracian, even though you're not. It's branding. You wear it like a costume. But by night, you are someone else entirely. You whisper verses to your bruises. You write metaphors about fire ants and regret. You even start experimenting with word games, double meanings, playful insults no one but you and Livia would catch. Steel by day, soul by night. Historians still argue whether gladiators could retain a sense of individual identity under the weight of constant violence. Whether they broke into fragments or clung desperately to scraps of self. You've answered that for yourself. You're more whole now than you've ever been. Because now, you choose who you are, at least when the sun goes down. Livia helps. Her notes have grown longer, bolder. She even sends you writing prompts, like a tutor in a very dangerous school. Describe the smell of fear without using the word fear. Write something from your opponent's point of view. What's the saddest thing you've ever seen? Make it beautiful. You take each one like a holy command. You no longer write just to survive. You write because it lets you escape the Colosseum even while standing inside it. You start seeing the arena in new ways. Not just sand and screams, but symbols, arcs, themes. You begin to realize that even death has choreography. One night, unable to sleep, you sneak onto the training grounds. You sit in the middle of the sandpit, legs crossed, and write by moonlight. You trace letters with a sharp stone, hoping the guards are too tired, or too superstitious, to stop you. You write about armor. Not the kind made of bronze and leather, but the kind you build with your words. The kind that lets you walk through jeering crowds without flinching. The kind that lets you care about someone in secret and not feel weaker for it. Your poetry becomes sharper, tighter, less flowery, more like steel. But still beautiful. Livia notices. Her next letter reads, "You've stopped writing like you're apologizing. Now you sound like you mean it." And you do. Meanwhile, the graffiti ghost continues to spar with you. But the tone shifts. Less mockery now. More challenge. More mutual respect. Your rhymes have teeth, but do they bite? Or do they merely dress the fight? You grin as you read it. You respond. My rhymes bleed ink because my hands are stained with truths your mind still bans. Even Marcellus seems impressed. One night, as he sharpens his dagger, he mutters, "You ever write one about me? Make sure I sound taller." You do. Just for fun. A haiku. Wine-blurred philosopher. Wields sarcasm like a sword. Sleeps through every fight. You don't show him, but it makes you laugh harder than you have in weeks. Then, a twist you never expected. During a public match, your fifth this month, you hear your own poem shouted from the stands. Not by a drunken admirer, but by a child. A boy, maybe 10 years old, stands on a marble bench yelling. He swings his blade with quiet grief, as if each blow is a falling leaf. The crowd hushes. You freeze. Your opponent hesitates. Then the boy's father, some toga-wrapped official, claps once. That's the one by the Gladiator poet. He calls. And just like that, it spreads. People have been memorizing your verses, reciting them, quoting you at dinner. Your name's not on them, of course. Just your fighting title. The Silent Sword. But still, they know your words. You finish the match dazed, bruised, but alive. And for the first time in your fighting life, you feel something stranger than pain or pride. You feel seen. That night, in the barracks, as everyone else snores and mutters in their sleep, you lie awake staring at the rafters. You trace a line in the dust above your bunk with one fingertip. I walk through fire with words as shoes. Each step a rhyme, each scar a muse. You don't sleep, but you don't need to. Because now you're not just a man with a sword and a secret. You're a voice. And Rome is starting to listen. The man shows up on Wednesday. Or maybe it's a Thursday. You've long since lost track of days beyond fight nights and feast days. He doesn't wear armor. Or even a guard's leather. Just a deep red tunic, sandals too clean for walking anywhere real, and a ring that catches every ounce of sunlight like it's trying to blind someone. He smells faintly of lavender and something sharper, ink, maybe. You're in the middle of rolling bandages when he calls your name. Not your fighting name. Your real name. The one you haven't heard anyone say aloud since your mother slurred it over a pot of boiled onions. Do you have a moment? He asks. His voice is smooth, like a scroll being unrolled. You nod. He introduces himself as Gaius Vitellius, an advisor to someone important. He never says exactly who. The kind of man who walks beside power but never casts a shadow of his own. The kind of man who writes letters you'll never see but will absolutely determine your fate. I've been reading your work, he says, casual as if complimenting a loaf of bread. Not bad. A bit dramatic, but then, what isn't in your line of work? You don't know what to say. So you just stand there. A statue with a pulse. I'm assembling a collection, he goes on. A series of voices. From every corner of Rome. And you, well, you're unique. A gladiator who writes sonnets. That's novelty wrapped in tragedy. Audiences love that. You narrow your eyes. You want to buy my poems? Borrow them, really, he says, smiling like a man who's never had to pay full price for anything. You'll still write them. I'll just make sure the right people hear them. For a small fee, of course. You hesitate. He adds, you'll be anonymous, naturally. Can't have Rome falling in love with a slave, can we? Historians still argue whether enslaved people in Rome could claim intellectual property, or if everything they created legally belonged to their owners. But in practice, ownership is always about power. And this man has more than you. Still, you agree. Because coin means leverage. Leverage means time. And time means more chances to write. To see Livia again. To breathe. Over the next few weeks, Gaius becomes your ghost publisher. He slips your work into salons, feasts, and scribes' circles. You never see the results, but you hear whispers. You hear your metaphors mangled and reshaped in alleyways. You hear your couplets misquoted by merchants as they haggle over spices. One verse even shows up scratched into a barmaid's table. And then one day, a guard bows to you. Not mockingly. Not sarcastically. Just once, a quick dip of the head. Recognition. That's when it hits you. You're not famous. But your words are. And it terrifies you. Because fame is fire in Rome. It burns faster than it lights. You've seen how the crowd turns. One day, they cheer for a man. The next, they toss rotten dates at his corpse. So, you stay quiet. You keep your helmet low. You let Gaius do the talking. But the poems grow sharper. Stranger. You write about duality now. About masks. About living between two identities and feeling like neither belongs to you. Livia's notes grow more serious too. She writes. They are reading you. Not all of them understand you. But they feel you. Do you know how rare that is? You don't answer right away. Instead, you write something simple. If I scream in verse and no one knows it's me, have I spoken at all? The next day, a single white flower is left at your bunk. No note. No explanation. Just the scent of something soft in a place that has never known it. Meanwhile, Gaius grows more ambitious. He brings you scrolls now, other poets to study. Catullus, Ovid, Martial. You devour them like honeyed bread. Some lines you memorize instantly. Others you argue with. One even makes you laugh out loud. I hate and I love. Why, you ask? I don't know. But I feel it, and it tears me apart. You whisper that one before every fight now. Like a prayer. Like armor. Then one day, Gaius hands you something different. A commission. A senator wants something romantic, he says. Something that will move his wife to tears. You blink. But it's for her birthday. Exactly, he says, not understanding the irony. He wants it to sound authentic. So, you write it. A poem about longing and distance and what it means to love someone while pretending not to. You hate yourself a little. But you need the coin. And the space. And the silence. The senator is so moved, he sends a bottle of wine and a new cloak. You don't touch either. Instead, you write something angry. Something raw. I trade verses like arrows. Tipped in someone else's truth. They buy my voice. Then make me thank them for it. The next morning, that verse is gone. Gaius must have taken it. You wonder what party it will end up in. What noblewoman will quote your bitterness like it's exotic spice. Still, you keep writing. Because even when they steal your voice, it's still yours inside. Even when they brand your body, your mind walks free. And even when Rome tries to own you, some part of you remains unreachable. Just ink and fire. Waiting for the next page. You notice the changes before anyone says anything. It's the way your name lingers longer on lips. Not just Thrax, your fighting name, but the way even the guards are starting to tilt their heads when they say it. Like the syllables mean more than they used to. Like they might be quoting you. One morning, you're brought to the yard early. The sun hasn't even begun to stretch across the red tiles. You think it's a training penalty, too many smart remarks about the food again, but instead, you're told to wait. That someone important is coming. You expect Gaius. Or maybe a merchant patron with literary aspirations. What you don't expect is the litter that arrives, carried by 4 men, its silk curtains parting to reveal a woman older than Yolanista but twice as dangerous by the look of her. Her eyes are sharp, her lips thinner than judgment. You're told to kneel. You do, because even poets know how to bow. She steps down with a grace that makes the stone path look like it's apologizing for being dusty. You are the one they call the poet Gladiator, she asks. Her voice is rich, measured, not kind. You nod. She gestures, and a slave brings her a scroll. Recite, she says. The one about silence and steel. Your throat goes dry. But you speak. You hear your own words fall into the morning air like leaves. She doesn't blink. When you finish, she says nothing. Just hums once, thoughtfully, and returns to her litter. That evening, Gaius appears in your cell with new parchment and finer ink. You've got her attention now, he says, and it sounds more like a threat than a reward. From that point on, things accelerate. Your words are no longer just scribbled graffiti or whispered verse, they're becoming currency. They're used in toasts, in seductions, even, apparently, in legal arguments. Someone claims to have quoted you in court, comparing tax collectors to wolves in the vineyard of virtue. You don't know what that means, but it means they're listening. And with attention comes danger. Historians still argue whether gladiators were allowed to rise culturally or whether their success was always capped by law and custom. But in your case, you're learning that elevation in Rome is a tricky thing. It's not a ladder, it's a stage. The higher you rise, the more people can see you. And the more they want to control what you say. Rumors begin. That you're being coached by a senator. That your poems are ghostwritten. That Thrax is actually a woman in disguise, or a team of scribes, or a clever merchant's hoax. Livia writes less now. Her last note was terse. Be careful. You are becoming valuable. Valuable things in Rome tend to disappear. You reread it 3 times. Burn it. Then rewrite it from memory just so you can burn it again. You find yourself watched more closely. Not by guards, but by other fighters. Some resent you. Some want to ride your fame. One, a stocky brute from Gaul, challenges you publicly. Not to a duel. To a poem-off. It's absurd. But the ludus eats it up. The guards even place bets. You win, of course. His rhymes are mostly insults about your nose. But it earns you something dangerous, laughter. Applause. Not for violence, but for wit. Now, you are no longer just a spectacle. You're a voice with an audience. You take fewer risks. You stop leaving notes behind the statue of Mercury. You hide your drafts inside hollowed-out loaves of bread. You speak to Livia only through metaphor in public verses. Still, you can feel the tension rising. One night, you wake to find your straw mattress slashed. Your parchment gone. A smear of soot where your ink used to be. Someone's warning you. The next morning, Gaius tells you with forced calm, stay quiet for a while. The wrong senator's nephew quoted you at the wrong party. You ask what line. He hesitates. Then says, the one about pretending to worship statues while carving their feet into dust. You hadn't even meant it politically. But that's the thing about poems, they become weapons in the hands of people you never meet. So you retreat. You write only in your head now. You murmur lines to yourself in the bathhouse, half singing them like hymns. You avoid eye contact. You let the poet part of you curl inwards. Just for now. But inside, you're still burning. And every verse you hold back sharpens. Because sooner or later, you'll speak again. And when you do, Rome will hear it. The Colosseum smells like fear, sweat, and roasted chickpeas. You're standing in the holding pen beneath the arena, helmet under your arm, fingers twitching around the hilt of your gladius. Above you, the sound of thousands, stomping, shouting, demanding, cascades down like a waterfall of noise. The kind that drowns out everything else, including reason. You've been here before. Many times. But something's different today. Because this time, you're not just walking into the arena as a fighter. You're walking in as someone with a reputation. A symbol. A voice. And maybe, just maybe, a target. Gaius warned you this morning, there are whispers. That you're using your poetry to stir unrest. That your verses are coded messages. You'd laughed at the time. They're love poems and metaphors. He'd looked at you flatly. To a senator's daughter. in a city where daughters are currency. So now you stand in the shadowed belly of Rome's hunger, wondering if you'll die today, not from a blade, but from meaning too much. Historians still argue whether gladiatorial combat was purely entertainment or whether it served deeper political functions, a pressure valve, a warning system, a message dressed in carnage. But you can feel it in your bones. Everything in Rome is political. Even silence. Especially silence. The gate creaks open. Light pours in like judgment. You step out. The sun is high and cruel. The sand is already churned from earlier matches. There's a smear of blood across one of the painted stones, too bright, too fresh. You don't know who died there. You're not sure it matters. Your opponent is waiting. He's huge. Taller than you. A secutor, shield like a wall, sword like a whisper. You've fought him once before. He's faster than he looks. But today, as you raise your weapon, something changes. A voice from the crowd cuts through the roar. Give us a sonnet. You blink. Then laughter ripples across the stands. Cheers. Someone else shouts, Poet! Poet! They're not mocking you. They're asking for you. You don't respond. Not with words. You can't. Not yet. But your breath catches in your chest. Because they know. Because he knows, the Emperor is watching. Somewhere, high above, cloaked in shadow and surrounded by men who translate your every syllable into something dangerous. You move carefully. The match begins. Dust kicks up around your feet. Your blades clash with the secutors, sparks singing out like fireflies. You duck, roll, swing, parry. It's all muscle memory by now, like writing a familiar line. But your mind isn't quiet. You think about what the crowd wants. Not blood. Not just today. They want words. They want poetry in motion. They want you to make the fight mean something. So you do. You start weaving metaphor into your movements. You don't just strike, you paint with your blade. Wide arcs like commas. Short jabs like punctuation. You fight like you're writing a stanza. The crowd sees it. They begin to chant in rhythm, unconsciously mirroring your pace. You turn violence into verse. You become the story they didn't know they needed. The secutor catches your arm. Not deep, but enough. Blood drips. You stagger. The chant falters. And then you rise. You let your blood hit the sand like ink. And you whisper, just loud enough for your opponent to hear. They cheer for death, but I write life. With every cut, I kill the knife. He freezes for half a second. That's all you need. You knock his blade aside, press your own to his throat, and wait. The crowd roars. You step back. You don't finish it. You lower your weapon and walk to the edge of the arena, blood trickling down your wrist, heart thundering in your ears. You turn your face to the stands, look up, and raise your arms. Not in victory. In question. The Emperor's box is silent. And then, slowly, impossibly, someone claps. Just once. Then again. Then others join. Until the Colosseum shakes with applause. Not for death. Not for brutality. For mercy. For poetry. For defiance. For you. When you return to the holding chambers, the guards say nothing. One of them even hands you a cloth to clean your blade. Gaius appears moments later, face pale. You could have been killed, he hisses. I still might be, you answer, deadpan. But his lips twitch. They're asking for you by name, he says. The real one. And just like that, everything changes. You are no longer just a weapon. Or a novelty. You are a gladiator with a following. And Rome doesn't know what to do with that. Not yet. But it will. The bread is stale. Hard enough to chip a tooth. You poke at it with suspicion, half thinking it's another prank from Marcellus, who once salted your washcloth for fun. But then you notice the fold. Right there, at the base of the loaf. A neat, deliberate crease in the crust. You tear it open slowly, carefully. Inside, wrapped in a sliver of cloth, is parchment. Your hands tremble. You haven't seen Livia's handwriting in weeks. Not since the arena, when the cheers shifted and the Emperor's gaze followed you like a hunting hawk. The silence since then had scraped at your ribs like sandpaper. But here she is again. Her note is brief. You're still breathing. That means you still owe me a poem about Allahs. You exhale, then laugh. A soft, stunned kind of laugh that gets you a side eye from the guard near the door. You hide the note in your wrist bandage and bite into the bread. Now suddenly the best thing you've eaten all month. It becomes your new method. Poetry smuggled in carbohydrates. You bake your verses into loaves, scratch them onto scraps, fold them into dry figs, even once hide a riddle inside a wine gourd. The kitchen boy gets suspicious. You bribe him with 2 rhyming insults about his eyebrows. Each message to Livia is riskier than the last, but also more careful. You code your lines now, layered metaphors and allusions only she would understand. Olive trees become metaphors for waiting. Raindrops become secret touches. The moon is always her. Historians still argue whether noble women were ever involved in resistance literature, or if such stories are modern fantasy draped over old bones. But what you and Livia share now, this secret correspondence between 2 cages, is as real as any wound. Her replies come infrequently, but always precisely when you begin to doubt. One night, after a grueling match leaves your ankle twisted and your shoulder wrapped tight, you limp back to your cell and find nothing waiting for you. No bread. No parchment. No whisper of ink. You almost cry. And then Marcellus hands you a date. Just one. Dark and shiny. Inside? A poem. If you limp, limp toward me. If you bleed, bleed words. And if they silence your voice, write in their silence. You don't sleep that night. You don't even sit. You just pace the cell until your ankle throbs like a drumbeat, composing line after line in your head. The next day, you convince a stable boy to carry a line back in exchange for a poem about his donkey. He accepts the trade. The donkey's name is Flavia. You rhyme it with bravia and gravia. It's terrible. He loves it. The guards grow lazier with searches. Fame has a way of making people overlook your shadows. But not everyone is blind. One morning, after an early sparring match, you return to find your mattress overturned and your hidden cache of notes disturbed. Nothing taken. Just touched. Like a hand reached in, rummaged around, then carefully put everything back. You get the message. Watch your words. So you start baking double meanings into everything. A poem about rain is also a warning. A stanza about a garden also describes a nearby guard's patrol route. A sonnet about sleeplessness ends with a line only Livia would recognize, her favorite flower, folded into a line break. You're not just a poet anymore. You're a courier. A trickster. A spy wrapped in metaphors. One day, you receive a message in an unexpected form, a pair of sandals. Too fine for a fighter. Clearly not from the ludus. Inside one, stitched in blue thread, is a single line. The olive tree bends. But it does not break. You press the sandals to your chest. You don't wear them, of course. You hide them behind a cracked tile in the wall, safe next to your earlier verses. And you wonder, not for the first time, how far this can go. How long can poetry pass as bread? How long can love travel wrapped in silence? And how long before Rome notices that while your blade wins matches, it's your words that are reshaping the crowd? The scroll arrives on a silver tray. You're sitting in the shade of a training yard pillar, dabbing sweat from your brow with a strip of linen that used to be a tunic sleeve, when 2 guards approach. Not the usual gruff types with onion breath and too much helmet polish, these 2 were imperial livery. Not emperor level, but close enough to make your pulse forget its rhythm. The tray is polished. The scroll tied with crimson ribbon. No words spoken. Just a nod, and they're gone. You don't open it right away. Not out of fear, exactly, more out of instinct. You've learned the hard way in Rome that messages wrapped too nicely are rarely kind. And yet, when you finally tug the ribbon free and unfurl the parchment, your fingers go cold. It's your poem. One of your earlier ones. The one about the river and the chained bird, how it sings anyway, because what else can it do? But beneath your verse, in a looping, deliberate hand, is a new note. Your words move the empress. She wishes to meet the poet who remembers how to mourn. Historians still argue whether imperial women truly held influence in matters of art and philosophy, or if they merely dabbled behind veils of power. But there's no doubt, a summons like this isn't a request. You're brought to the palace 2 days later under strict escort. Not in chains, but not exactly free either. The path winds through courtyards scented with myrrh and rosemary, past fountains carved with dolphins and heroes whose names you barely remember. You try not to gape. You fail. The Empress's garden is quiet. Unnaturally so. Even the birds seem to hold their breath. She sits beneath a pomegranate tree, veiled, surrounded by cushions and soft fabrics that whisper as they move. She doesn't look at you immediately. Instead, she says, "Sit." You do. Your armor creaks. The cushion under you feels like a cloud. You've never been so uncomfortable. She speaks again, softer now. You've made my niece cry. Twice. Once with sorrow. Once with hope. It takes you a moment to process that. You blink. Your niece? She looks at you then. And smiles. Livia. Your stomach drops. The Empress of Rome, most powerful woman in the known world, is related to the one person you've allowed yourself to write openly, foolishly, desperately for. You wonder if this is the part where you die. But she doesn't call the guards. Doesn't raise her voice. She pours wine. You stirred something, she says. In Livia. In others. In me. Do you know how rare that is? You say nothing. She hands you a new scroll. You will write for the imperial court now. Anonymous, of course. You will submit your verses to me. If I approve, they will circulate. You unroll the scroll. The wax seal still smells warm. This isn't a choice, she adds. This is a gift. And for a moment, it feels like one. Access. Influence. Protection. But then she says, in return, you will stop writing for her. No more poems. No more riddles. No more olives. The pomegranate tree rustles. You can't speak. You can barely breathe. You want to protest. To argue. But you know Rome. You know how it eats rebellion for breakfast and digests it slowly, painfully, across decades. So you bow your head. And accept the scroll. That night, back in your cell, you stare at blank parchment for hours. You try to write something simple. Just a line. Anything. But your hand won't move. Eventually, you whisper to the air. A voice without echo. Is just breath pretending to matter. No one hears it. No one replies. But the next morning, your bread is warm. And inside? A single note. The pomegranate bends too. And that's how you know Livia still hears you. Still waits. Still writes. Even now. You don't hear the crowd anymore. Not like you used to. Where there once was a roar, now there's a rustle, like parchment brushing against itself. Like whispers on a library breeze. Every cheer feels muffled, distant. Because your mind, now, is split between the fight and the unwritten line. The arena is sweltering. Sun bouncing off bronze. You blink away sweat, squint at your opponent, and wonder, absurdly, whether the image of him raising his trident could serve as a metaphor for inevitability. You mentally file on under possibles. And that's when it hits you. You're writing while fighting. Not just composing lines in the safety of the barracks. No. You're drafting mid-duel. Dodging spear thrusts while thinking of stanzas. Parrying jabs with one part of your brain, sculpting syllables with the other. You land a hit, a clean strike to the thigh, and the crowd gasps. He stumbles. Doesn't fall. But what you remember most isn't the movement, or the wound, or even the feel of your blade in his flesh. It's the line that forms in your head as it happens. Even pain can dance. When dressed in bronze and pride. And I am tired of dancing. You whisper it later in the bathhouse, under your breath. A few other fighters glance over. One repeats the last line to himself, like he's trying to understand it. Historians still argue whether gladiators fought purely for survival or if, for some, it became performance, art in motion, expression through violence. You stopped wondering. You know what you are now. You're not a killer. You're a poet with calluses and blood in your teeth. And Rome is starting to get the memo. Your poetry, filtered now through the Empress's hand, travels faster than ever. It appears on the backs of amphora labels, etched into the side of bathhouse basins, scratched into temple doors. You even hear of a merchant who embroidered one of your lines onto a toga sash and claimed it as his own. I weep in rhythm is my line, you mutter, stabbing a bread crust with unnecessary aggression. But what surprises you most is the shift in tone. The court's favorite pieces? Not the hopeful ones. Not the love poems. No, they crave the ones soaked in quiet sorrow. Verses that sting like a blister beneath gold. Pain dressed up in grace. It makes you uneasy. Because they love the mask, not the man. You write for the court now. Yes. But every now and then, when the moon is high and the air too hot to sleep, you still write for her. For Livia. You tuck your secret poems into hidden places. Under floor stones. Inside scroll tubes meant for ash. Sometimes, you don't even send them. You just write them. Because the writing is the part that keeps you from breaking. One night, inspired by nothing but hunger and heartbreak, you scrawl your most daring work yet. It's short. Barely a dozen words. But it's the most honest thing you've written in weeks. I fight because I must. I write because I won't. You hide it in the binding of a training manual. The next morning, it's gone. And 2 days later, it appears, scratched into a wall outside the Senate baths. Word for word. You don't know who took it. But now, Rome knows it came from you. No initials. No name. But it doesn't matter. They know. Whispers follow you through the halls. He's the one, someone murmurs as you pass. The poet who refused. You don't know what you refuse. But whatever it was, it's become a symbol. And symbols are dangerous. You begin to notice extra guards during your training matches. A little too close. A little too alert. You suspect they've been instructed not to protect you, but to protect Rome from you. You're not surprised. Because when poetry draws blood, even emperors bleed. Still, you don't stop. Even during matches, you sneak in lines. You hum rhythms while circling opponents. Once, during a particularly long standoff, you mutter an entire verse under your breath while waiting for your foe to strike. He blinks. Hesitates. You win in one move. Back in your cell, you write the moment down. Mid-battle breath. Becomes a blank scroll. He who hesitates. Here's a poem instead of war. You smile. Rome still owns your body. But your voice? That's yours. Always. You hear your own words before you see who sang them. It's late afternoon in the baths, where steam clings to every surface like gossip. You're sinking into the water, easing bruises that haven't had time to bloom yet, when a young man, barely 20, clean-shaven, with teeth too white to be honest, recites your verse out loud. Not to you. To a girl. She giggles. He says, in that practice, I'm a poet too voice. I watch the sky break into verses, and wish the stars would rhyme for once. You freeze. You wrote that line in a fever, half-starved, with a cracked lip and a dull quill. You whispered it into the wall behind your bunk. Never submitted it. Never shared it. And yet, here it is, being deployed in pursuit of affection, floating lazily among rose-scented vapor. The young man doesn't notice you. But another bather, older, leans over and asks, is that the gladiator's work? The boy shrugs. Does it matter? A line's a line. You get out of the bath early. Back in your cell, you pace like a caged wolf. You shouldn't be angry. Shouldn't feel stolen from. After all, wasn't this the dream? For your words to be repeated? Known? To live beyond you? But repetition without understanding, without credit, feels like watching someone wear your skin as a costume. Historians still argue whether ancient Rome had true concepts of authorship. Plagiarism, intellectual theft, these were loose ideas, not rules. If a line traveled, it lived. And whoever repeated it best owned it. You get it. You do. But that night, you write anyway. They dress him on lines like stolen robes. But none were the weight of the ink. Marcellus reads it over your shoulder. He doesn't comment. Just gives a quiet, knowing nod. He's not a poet. But he knows what it means to be used. Word travels quickly. A week later, a senator's son is caught scribbling one of your unauthorized verses into the stone of a temple wall. Not just any temple, the one dedicated to Minerva, the goddess of wisdom. He claims it was just something he heard. The priestess, unimpressed, has him scrub every inch of the wall clean. But the damage is done. Now the Senate knows you're leaking. Not just your authorized verses. Everything. That same night, the Empress sends for you. This time, there's no wine. She stands beneath a frieze of Apollo and doesn't invite you to sit. You were given protection, she says. A path. An audience. You nod. And a muzzle. Her eyes flash. Just once. Then calm. You think we fear your poetry? No, you say. You fear that people think with it. The silence that follows is long and thin. Like a blade unsheathed but not yet swung. She turns. Writes something harmless. About the weather. Or birds. Or the Nile. Something distant. You bow. Leave. Do neither. Instead, you write your most dangerous verse yet. It's framed as a dream. You know they'll scan it for threats, so you embed the truth beneath metaphor. I saw the emperor dream of mirrors. He smashed each one. But every shard still reflected him. Smaller. Sharper. Unstoppable. You submit it through Gaius. He reads it once. Doesn't blink. Clever, he mutters. Sharp enough to be art. Ambiguous enough to survive. 2 days later, you're summoned again. But not to the palace. To the arena. A surprise match. No warning. No briefing. Just steel and sand. You've been here before. But never like this. You know what this is. A reminder. You're given no time to stretch. No time to focus. Your opponent is a former centurion, scarred, limping, but still twice as deadly as any crowd-pleasing brute. He doesn't smile. Doesn't blink. Just nods once, like a man who knows he's doing his duty. And when the gate opens, you run. Not from him, but around him. You stall. You dance. You tire him out. You let the crowd think it's theater, but it's survival. Your ribs scream with every breath. Your ankle flares from that old twist. But you don't stop. Because this is no longer about winning. This is about being seen. So after 15 minutes of grueling movement, of near misses and shallow cuts, you leap back, raise your arms, and shout to the crowd. He fights with honor. I fight to be heard. We both bleed truth. But only one of us gets to speak. A stunned pause. Then, an uproar. You lose the match. By decision. But you walk out alive. And as you limp back through the gates, your hand pressed to a blooming bruise, you pass a new line scrawled on the inner wall. You didn't write it. You don't know who did. But it reads, "We hear you. Write louder." The whispering begins before dawn. You hear it in the training yard, where the clang of blades sounds a little too pointed, and you hear it in the baths, floating between half-laughed stories and dripping tiles. Even the guards, usually too gruff to gossip, exchange short glances when you walk past. They're saying someone called you a fraud. Not just a bad poet or a lucky fighter, but an actual fraud, claiming your verses aren't your own. That someone else has been writing them for you. That you're nothing more than a puppet with a sword and a borrowed tongue. You don't know who started it, but you have a very good guess. Cassianus. Another gladiator. Big, popular, sharp-tongued. The kind of man who knows how to win a crowd before the match even starts. You've seen the way he struts after a fight, soaking in the applause like sunlight. He's been getting fewer cheers lately. Yours have been louder. It's not just jealousy. It's fear. Because Rome has room for only one golden story at a time. And your story is starting to eclipse his. He corners you near the stables while you're brushing a horse you barely tolerate. "I hear you've been composing again," he says, smiling like a man who's already decided how this ends. "You don't take the bait." "Words don't bruise," you reply. "No," he says, stepping closer, "but they rot from the inside. Like figs pretending not to be split." He leans on the post like he owns it and adds, "The crowd deserves truth. I think they're ready to find out who you really are." You nod once. "Tomorrow. Public match. No masks." He grins. "We're your best metaphor." That night, you can't write a word. Your thoughts scatter like leaves in wind. Every time you pick up the quill, your hand stalls halfway to the parchment. You think about everything he said. About what it means if he's right. About what it means if he's wrong and still wins. You stay awake, pacing your cell until Marcellus pokes his head in and says, "Big fight tomorrow." You nod. He tosses you a skin of wine. "Write anything?" You shake your head. "Good," he says. "You'll fight better." And he leaves. By morning, your hands are steady. You dress in your oldest tunic, no showy armor, no golden polish. Just you. The arena is packed. The match was unannounced, but the rumor traveled faster than the official proclamations ever could. The crowd smells blood in the water. Cassianus plays to them. He bows. He waves. He bellows, "Let's see if poems make good armor." The crowd howls. You don't respond. You just raise your blade. He comes in hard, every strike meant not just to wound, but to humiliate. His sword whistles past your head. You duck, parry, deflect. Let him burn himself out on rage. He's fast, but sloppy. You land no hits. You don't need to. Your silence is doing the work. He cuts your arm, shallow and hot. Right about that, he taunts. You let the blood drip, calmly. Then, as he charges again, you meet his eyes and say, "A fraud can't choose mercy." Your blade taps his thigh. He falters. "A liar won't look away," you add, stepping back, still calm. "And a puppet doesn't write its own ending." Then you lower your weapon and walk away. The arena goes dead quiet. Cassianus stands frozen, weapon raised, unsure what just happened. Then the crowd rises. Not in anger. In awe. And they chant your name, not Thrax, not the silent sword, but your real name. Someone says it first. Then a second. Then 50. Then thousands. Cassianus lowers his blade. You don't even look back. You return to your cell, bruised, bleeding slightly, and for the first time in days, your hand doesn't tremble when you pick up the quill. You write one line, plain and clean. They called me false, so I gave them truth. They tried to fight my name. Now they sing it. The announcement comes at sunset. Not from a herald, but from a guard with a tone too flat to be casual. You're to fight in a special match tomorrow, the kind reserved for public holidays, the kind that draws both commoners and senators into the same marble stands. When you ask who you're facing, the guard shrugs. Someone the crowd knows. Someone they'll want blood from. That should be you, but lately, you've become too complicated. At dinner, the men talk. They know something's off. Special matches mean pageantry, and pageantry usually means someone dies for symbolism. You eat your bread in silence, stomach tight, the taste like ash. When the courtyard empties, Gaius finds you. He doesn't speak at first, just sits beside you on the edge of the fountain. Finally, he says, they want a decision. A test. You've become more than they expected. And now they need to know if they own you. You nod slowly. You already knew. But hearing it laid out like a ledger makes it feel real. He hands you a scroll. Your opponent is Flavian. You stop breathing for a second. Flavian was your first real friend in the Ludus. You trained together. Fought side by side. Shared stories in the dark. He's older now, slower, but still sharp. Still loyal. He knows? You ask. Gaius nods. He volunteered. Said if anyone had to do it, it should be him. Your heart doesn't crack. It bends. It warps under pressure like a shield left too long in rain. They want blood, Gaius continues. But not just any blood. They want you to choose. Kill someone you love, or lose your voice forever. You know what he means. If you refuse the fight, they won't kill you. No, they'll do something worse. They'll cut out your tongue. Mute the poet. Let the gladiator rot in silence. The choice is clear, brutal, and beautifully Roman. You walk away without answering. That night, you write nothing. You lie awake thinking of Flavian's laugh, the one he only uses after 2 mugs of wine. You remember how he once taught you the names of stars, how he traced constellations in the dirt while the others slept. You remember how he once said, if I die in the arena, make sure I become a good metaphor. Morning arrives too fast. You're dressed before the guards knock. The arena is loud today, full of festival cheer. The banners are bright. The crowd wears garlands. They don't know what they're about to watch. You walk out into sunlight that burns your skin and blinds your eyes. Flavian's already there. He smiles. The same old smile. A little sad. A little proud. You draw your blade. He does too. You don't speak. You don't have to. The match begins. It's slow at first. Careful. Respectful. You trade light blows. Neither of you commits. The crowd grows restless. They want blood. They want spectacle. You see the emperor in his box, not smiling, not frowning, just watching. Measuring. Waiting for you to choose. Flavian lunges. You block. You fake a stumble. He catches the signal. Starts pushing harder. The crowd wakes up. They smell death. You dance back, then forward, pressing him, then giving ground. Dust swirls around your feet like smoke. Every clang of metal is a decision. Every breath, a countdown. And then, an opening. You could take him down. Right now. End it. The angle is perfect. You see it. He sees it. But you stop. And that's when he moves. Fast. Faster than you thought he could. His blade flashes, and you feel it before you understand it. Pain across your ribs, shallow but hot. You react on instinct, spinning, blade raised. And then, he drops his weapon. Just lets it fall. You freeze. He steps back, chest heaving. Do it, he mouths. Make it mean something. You shake your head. He closes his eyes. And kneels. The crowd gasps. You raise your blade. You think of silence. Of freedom. Of poetry etched into bone. And then you plunge the blade into the sand beside him. The arena explodes in confusion. Some cheer. Others boo. You turn and walk away. No salute. No blood. Just defiance. Back in your cell, they lock the door harder than usual. No one speaks to you. Until nightfall. A knock. A tray of food. And beneath the bread, folded carefully, a note in Lydia's handwriting. I saw what you did. You still have your voice. Now use it. You eat in silence. Then write one line in the dirt by your bed. Mercy is the only verse that cannot be revised. You wake to whispers outside your cell, fast, hushed, urgent. Someone's arguing with a guard. You recognize Gaius's voice, sharp as always but missing its usual arrogance. You can't make out the words, but the tone says everything. Something has shifted. Again. When the door creaks open, you're already sitting up. Gaius steps in without ceremony and tosses something onto your straw bed. It's not parchment. It's not a weapon. It's a shard of amphora, the kind usually used to hold olive oil or wine. This one's been polished smooth on one side, rough and jagged along the edges. You lift it carefully and see the scratch marks. It's a poem. Yours. One of the early ones. Not a performance piece, not a commissioned verse. A raw, confessional line you'd scribbled in charcoal on the underside of a training stool and forgotten about. And now, somehow, it's here, etched in pottery, passed like contraband, preserved like scripture. You look up. Gaius meets your gaze. They're spreading you underground, he says. Pieces of your work are showing up in places I can't trace. Markets, temples, even outside the walls. You're being carved into stone. You blink, stunned. Who? He shrugs. No idea. Could be a dozen people. Could be one with a lot of time and a chisel. Then his voice drops. But they're reading you like prophecy. That's not safe. Not for you. Not for me. Historians still argue how much of ancient descent survived through anonymous inscriptions. Most of it probably didn't. Most of it was erased, or burned, or drowned in the sea of official decrees. But some of it made it. Enough to make you wonder if survival isn't always about staying silent, but about being difficult to forget. You run your finger along the edge of the shard. The verse is about breath, how every inhale in the arena feels like asking permission to live. You hadn't thought it mattered when you wrote it. But someone thought it mattered enough to cut it into clay. Later that day, another arrives. This one handed to you by a medic, slipped into your tunic while wrapping your wrist. Different verse. Different fragment. Same unmistakable lines. Then another appears at evening meal, hidden inside a loaf, the crust still warm. That night, you find a moment alone in the stables. You gather scraps, bone, brick, bits of broken slate, and begin carving your latest poem. Not for Livia. Not for Gaius. Not even for the crowd. For the people who are listening when they're not supposed to. You keep it short. Sharp. Unmistakably yours. They ask for blood, I give them echoes. They build walls, I write windows. You carve the last word slowly, deliberately, and hide the piece under a feeding trough. It won't stay there long. Nothing does anymore. By the end of the week, you count 9 fragments. They're not all yours. Some are fakes. Imitations. But that only proves your voice has become something larger than your own throat. And with that growth comes danger. Because now, you're no longer a single problem. You're a movement. So the pressure tightens. Guards begin confiscating parchment. Matches are shortened. Surveillance doubles. They search your bunk daily now, rifling through your linens like they expect to find a dagger where you've only ever kept ink. Gaius stops visiting. Marcellus goes quiet. And then, a new order, no writing materials. No ink. No charcoal. No bone shards. Nothing that can leave a mark. They're not silencing you. Not yet. They're starving you. But what they don't understand is that you've already adapted. You no longer need parchment. You write in dust. In steam. In breath. You murmur verses to the walls, to the horses, to the cracked stone behind the baths. You speak in rhythm, hoping someone, somewhere, is listening. And someone is. Because one night, while you sleep, someone leaves a message carved into your cell wall. 3 words. Write in bone. You run your hand over the letters. The grooves are shallow, rushed, but unmistakably intentional. You smile. Not because it's safe, but because you are no longer alone. The words will survive. Even if you don't. You don't see her slip into the crowd. No one does. But when the match ends and your ears are still ringing with the distant echo of cheers, she's waiting in the hallway behind the barracks, half-shadowed, cloaked, and breathless. Livia. Her face is sharper than you remember, or maybe it's just the lighting, but her voice is the same, controlled, warm, and dangerous. You're everywhere now, she says, her eyes scanning the corridor. And you're out of time. You close the distance between you without touching her. Guards patrol close these days. Eyes linger. What are you doing here? You whisper. They'll have you dragged up by dawn. She shakes her head. There's a plan. But it has to happen fast. You've never seen her like this. Her voice carries weight now. Purpose. She's not the senator's niece with clever letters anymore. She's a woman moving pieces on a board you didn't know existed. She pulls something from her satchel, parchment, rolled tight and sealed with wax. This is your real work, she says. Your poems, not the court-approved ones. They've been smuggled into the city for weeks. Now we're taking them straight into the forum. Public recitation. Copies left on benches, shrines, doorposts. The words are already loose. But if you vanish, they'll freeze in fear. This is the moment. The city is listening. You have to choose, fight again, or speak. Historians still argue about how rebellion spreads, whether it's swords or speeches, graffiti or gospel. But in that moment, you understand it isn't about noise. It's about clarity, about timing, and risk. You take the parchment from her and glance around the dim hallway. The walls feel tighter now. You whisper, "What happens if I'm caught?" Livia's smile doesn't waver. Then Rome decides what to do with the man behind the words. Not the fighter. Not the myth. You. That night, you make your choice. The plan unfolds quickly, faster than you'd like, but timing isn't a luxury anymore. Livia has allies. Scribes. Messengers. A temple priest who owes her family a favor. A baker who hides scrolls in flour sacks. Even Gaius, cautious but cornered, has agreed to look the other way for 24 hours. You don't sleep. You review every word. Rewrite half. Scratch out lines that feel too vague or too clever. What remains are verses sharp enough to pierce. No metaphors for safety. No riddles. Just truth wrapped in rhythm. Every line carries blood and breath. At dawn, the verses are distributed. You don't see it firsthand. You're still confined to the ludus under strict watch. But word trickles in fast. First from a stable boy, then a laundry slave, then one of the guards whose usual cruelty fades behind nervous glances. It's happening. Your words are out there. Not in the arena. In the streets. Livia slips back in during the evening meal. No cloak this time. Just confidence. She slides into the space beside you and doesn't whisper. It's working, she says. People are quoting you. Loudly. Priests are pretending not to see. Vendors are slipping copies into grain baskets. Your name is being said like it's old and sacred. You exhale. You hadn't realized you were holding your breath all day. She adds, they don't care if you're a gladiator. They care that you gave them something honest. You want to smile. You want to believe this is the turning point. But nothing in Rome changes without someone paying a price. What happens when the emperor finds out? You ask. She leans in. He already has. That night, you find a mark scratched into your wall. Not a message. A symbol. One you don't recognize, but it feels deliberate. Below it, carved faintly, tomorrow decides everything. You lie awake, staring at the ceiling, the weight of silence heavier than chains. You know what's coming. A reckoning. Because tomorrow, the crowd will chant something. A name. A title. Maybe yours. Maybe not. But whatever they choose, it will echo longer than steel or screams. And in Rome, echoes shape empires. The sun is higher than usual when they summon you. Not a match day, not a training schedule, just a blunt command from a red-cloaked messenger. The emperor wants you in the arena. No armor. No weapon. Just you. The guards don't even try to look casual. They march in tighter formation. Their eyes flicker between your hands and your throat, like they're anticipating the possibility of a final poem turned into a final act. Marcellus watches you go without speaking, jaw clenched, nodding once like he's memorizing your face just in case this is goodbye. The arena is full. Not riotous, not celebratory, silent. An expectant hush covers the crowd like morning fog. You step into the open, sandals sinking slightly into the blood-salted sand, the center of a stage that was never really meant for truth. The emperor sits high above, flanked by senators, wives, guards, and shadows. Livia is there, standing behind him. She doesn't flinch when he speaks. You've become quite a spectacle, he says, his voice amplified by position alone. Not for your blade. Not for your body. For your words. You don't answer. Not yet. You've been offered patronage, position, protection, and you chose instead to speak beyond your station, to spread verses not approved by the court, to turn whispers into chants. Still, you say nothing. He gestures toward the crowd. Rome listens to you. So today, Rome will decide. The crowd doesn't move at first. It's too much. Too heavy. They've never been invited to choose like this. To declare, with their voices, the worth of a man who was never supposed to matter. The emperor lifts his hand. Speak your truth. One poem. One chance. You inhale slowly. Then, you begin. You speak the lines you wrote in the middle of the night, alone in your cell, when you had nothing but breath and the memory of freedom. Your voice is calm, unhurried. Not shouted. Just delivered. Like a truth that doesn't need permission. I came into this place with no name. Just a number, a scar, a silence to keep. I gave you blood when you asked, but you drank my words and found them sweeter. You want me to fight, But I already did. I fought to be seen. I fought to be heard. I fought to exist outside the moment of death. You pause. The crowd is silent, hanging on every breath. I am not your puppet, not your myth, not your reminder of how small mercy can be. I am a man, with a voice, and if you silence me, make sure you burn every wall I touched, every shard I etched, every tongue that dared remember. You finish. The wind picks up. The Emperor lowers his hand. And then it happens. A voice, somewhere in the stands, yells your name. Then another. Then 10. Then hundreds. Then thousands. Your name, not your title. They chant it. Rise with it. Shake the stones with it. The Emperor hesitates. His fingers twitch. Everyone waits. His hand remains still. And in Rome, when the hand does not fall, neither does the man. You are spared. No trumpet blares. No announcement is made. The Emperor simply stands, turns, and walks away. The arena exhales. You stand in the middle of it, alone, but not alone. Above, Livia meets your gaze. She doesn't smile, but her eyes are clear, alive. You walk back into the tunnel, bones humming, ribs tight. Gaius is there, for once speechless. The guards don't stop you. No one moves to chain you. The rules are different now. You weren't chosen. You were claimed. By them. By the people. By your voice. And voices are harder to kill than bodies. Freedom doesn't feel like you thought it would. It doesn't come with a parade, or a laurel crown, or even a proper meal. It comes in the form of silence, long and uncomfortable, as the guards escort you not back to your cell, but out through the side gate of the arena. You expect a trap, some cruel joke, another test. But they open the door, step aside, and one of them, one who used to call you poet boy with a sneer, nods at you without expression. You walk forward, past the threshold, into the bright, dusty streets of Rome, where nothing feels real and every face looks like a question. No official declaration was made. No title was handed down. The Emperor never said the words. But his silence, witnessed by thousands, was louder than any sentence. He didn't kill you. And in Rome, when the state chooses not to crush you, it means they're watching to see what you become. They don't own you now, but they haven't forgotten you either. At first, you don't go far. You stay near the edges of the forum, blending with the crowd, listening. Your name moves differently through the city now. Spoken not with awe, not quite, but with a careful kind of reverence, as if people expect you to vanish at any moment. Verses you never wrote appear on walls. Some are better than yours. Some are crude, fragments of phrases you abandoned, repurposed by others who took your voice and reshaped it into theirs. It used to bother you. Now, it doesn't. It means the words are alive. They're not yours anymore. That's the price of being heard. A former fighter from the Ludus finds you within a week. He's limping, retired from the games, working as a stable hand outside the city gates. He asks if you'll teach his son to write. Not to fight, just to write. Another man, a baker, slips you a sealed scroll hidden in a bread crust like the old days. Inside is a request from a merchant's daughter who wants to learn how to turn her grief into verse. You say yes. You say yes every time. Because that's what you fought for. Not fame. Not even freedom. But permission. To keep creating. To show others how. Gaius visits once, dressed in a simpler tunic than usual, no guards, no ring. He sits beside you under the archway of a forgotten aqueduct and says, "You're still dangerous." You nod. He offers no bribe, no threat. Just a statement. They'll try to reshape the story. Reclaim it. So be ready. You don't ask what he means. You already know. History is a jealous thing. It hates when truth doesn't match the version it chose. Livia comes later. She doesn't sneak this time. She walks directly through the street, head high, flanked by no one. You meet her near the olive grove on the edge of the hills, the same one you wrote about in a poem she once critiqued. You sit together under the trees. She tells you she's leaving Rome for a while. Too many eyes, too many questions. You don't ask her to stay. You just tell her you'll keep writing. She smiles, and it's quiet, and full, and nothing more needs to be said. Weeks pass. Then months. You never return to the arena. But sometimes, you walk by it. You stop just long enough to hear the crowd inside. Their roars don't shake you anymore. You know how those stories end. You know what they're built on. Instead, you open a small room above a blacksmith shop. You teach there. Not formally. Just anyone who wants to write, to speak, to craft a voice in a world that rewards silence. They come in secret at first, then less so. They bring scraps of pottery, old parchment, burned wood. They carve their stories into whatever they can carry. One day, you sit with a girl no older than 10. She's shaking as she holds the quill. You ask her what she wants to say. She thinks for a long time, then whispers, "I want to tell people my father's not a villain." You nod. "Then we'll write that." And in that moment, more than any match, more than any poem or praise or chant, you understand the shape of your victory. It isn't loud. It's not gilded or grand. It's quiet. It's a room full of people who were told their words didn't matter, learning that they always did. Years pass without ceremony. No statues are built in your honor. No festivals bear your name. But you're remembered, not with marble, but in the way people speak a little slower when sharing a line they love, or when a boy on the street scratches a verse into the dirt with a stick and looks over his shoulder like he's guarding something sacred. You still live above the blacksmith shop, though now the room is bigger, brighter. Children come and go. Some are orphans. Some are sons of shopkeepers. One or two, you suspect, are runaways from noble homes, dressed down and looking for meaning. You don't ask for names. Only truth. Rome doesn't forget you. It just changes the shape of its memory. They call you the fighter poet now in the stories, or the man who spoke instead of killing. Some versions say you were freed by divine will, others that the emperor feared your curse. The versions never agree. But they all start the same way, a man with a sword who chose a pen. You still write every day. Most of your poems aren't shared. They're tucked into baskets of bread, buried under trees, slipped between pages of borrowed books. You no longer crave applause. You crave resonance. Quiet recognition. The moment someone reads a line and inhales as if they've remembered something they didn't know they forgot. One afternoon, a boy delivers a message to your door. He says it's from a woman in the north. The note is short. He still quotes your lines in the palace. You know who she means. You smile, fold the note, and place it beside the old amphora shard from your prison cell, now cracked clean down the middle but still legible. You don't often think about the arena anymore, but when you do, you remember not the noise, not the fear, not even the blood, but the exact weight of silence before you chose to speak. That hush where everything paused. The world listening, the blade forgotten. That, more than any fight, became your legacy. Sometimes at night, you walk the streets alone, passing temples and taverns and the little fountain near the western gate where someone has etched a familiar line into the stone. One of yours, repurposed, twisted slightly. Improved, maybe. You don't mind. It means the words moved on. They evolved, like breath turning into wind. The city is older now. So are you. You move slower, with more thought. But your mind is as sharp as ever, your memory a library of rhythm and resistance. And even now, people come to you with pages in their hands, eyes bright, hearts full of questions they haven't found words for. You help them shape those questions. Not with answers, but with language, with rhythm, with fire, gentle and precise. Rome will forget many things. It always does. Empires rise and fall, names are scratched off marble, and streets are rebuilt over stories. But somewhere, a child will recite a line their mother once whispered, who heard it from her teacher, who read it on a fragment left in a gutter. And in that moment, you'll still be alive. Because gladiators die in the arena. But poets, when they're lucky, sleep in every voice that dares to speak. The night settles quietly now, without swords, without crowds, without the weight of expectation pressing against your ribs. You lie back in a room with no locks, surrounded by silence that isn't empty, but full of the lives you've touched, students, friends, those who never knew you personally but carry your words like charms. The air is cool, stirred only by the soft shuffle of leaves brushing against the window, and somewhere far off, a single voice hums a tune you recognize. It's nothing special. Just a melody someone put to a line you wrote long ago, when you still slept beside stone walls and dreamed of ink. You close your eyes and let the rhythm of the city slow. Rome is still out there, louder, older, ever shifting, but in this moment, it feels small, gentle, almost kind. Your limbs soften into the bedding, your breath evens, and the noise of thought begins to quiet. The poems are still there, curled beneath your skin like warm animals, but they no longer demand to be written. They rest with you now. They've earned it too. No one's chanting your name anymore. That's alright. What matters most was never in the applause, but in the echoes. The quiet voices repeating your truths, adapting your verses, whispering them into new corners of the world. So sleep now, knowing you were never just a man in armor or a prisoner with a pen. You were a bridge, between silence and sound, between fear and freedom, between what was expected and what could be. Let the city fade behind your eyelids. Let your body sink, word by word, into stillness. You've spoken enough for one life. And now, it's time to rest. Sweet dreams.